Welcome, everyone, to the Go Long podcast. I'm Tyler Dunn here with Jim Monis on a Friday night. Where else would you rather be, as a former head coach used to say, Jim, than right here, right now, remote, on Zoom, podcasting, with a beer in our hands and love in our hearts. How are you, my friend?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I wouldn't mind being at the U.S. Open right now.
Yeah, you're all about this U.S. Open.
That's too good to watch. Like, I love watching tennis anyway.
I can't
But
get into it. Not a big tennis
never.
fan.
Because I think the mental toughness of what they go through in tennis, because they're their own. The only time Serena loses is when she isn't.
Yeah.
She's fighting herself. So anyway, sorry.
I think the only time I really ever would play tennis was, family vacations, me and my brother, if it was like at the place we were
Oh
staying.
yeah.
And every single time without fail, I would lose my mind and the racket would go flying. And then that was it.
Part of
Because
it.
my brother is so patient. Like he'll just, lob me to death. He'll just wait for me to screw up. And I'm so impatient. It's like so reflective of our personalities. Austin's very
It's really
patient
funny that you
and
just
calm,
described
and I'm
that.
just not.
I swear there was just a point we just I'm watching it with my parents and we were laughing because Serena's opponent was just steady, just going to keep hitting back, return everything, and Serena finally just went for it, went out, hit out, just like you just said.
At some point, I just
I shouldn't say I love playing tennis. I always enjoyed playing tennis. We had some good battles. Mark Ross, NFL Network, our friend.
Okay.
When we used to work in Philly, we played some tennis, so it was good.
Well, we should just turn this into a tennis podcast.
So anyway, you had said, where would you rather be? New York City, U.S. Open wouldn't be bad.
Not too shabby.
But I said wouldn't be bad. I didn't say I definitely would rather be there because you have some stuff to talk about.
There's
it isn't even the regular season yet, and you're coming out of the gate strong. You are coming out of the gate strong this year. I call it the clubhouse turn. You're in first place after on the clubhouse turn of the race. I mean, you're just throwing stories out.
So we haven't
even hit the season yet.
People are investing their time, investing their hard-earned money into Go Long. We have to deliver. It's the best feeling, man. It's an adrenaline rush to know like that people are putting their faith, their trust into what's building over there at the newsletter and here on the podcast, obviously. But
I'm excited
to try to make it worth everybody's time. I mean, time's so valuable. Think about how busy we all are in the world.
No doubt.
Every second's accounted for. Everybody's so busy running around with kids, running around with their jobs, just looking at screens that if you really want to carve out 15 minutes to read something that I wrote, I do not take that lightly. And
you're right.
We have all the plans up, golongtd.com. It's all live. There's a lot going on in that post. I believe the headline is Allow Us to Reintroduce Ourselves. And in there, you'll see all the plans. So Bob McGinn, he's back.
I know it.
Tweaking the role a little. He's covered the Packers 43 years, so he's not going to be grinding that Packers film, but he's going to be ramping up the McGinn File features. He's going to be popping on this podcast. So if you do need that Bob fix and hear that lovely voice of Mr. Bob McGinn, he's going to join us from time to time. And then the draft series is still kicking. So he'll have the draft series.
That's what I was going to ask. Is he still going to do the draft?
Oh, he can't give that up.
He can't stop.
I told him, Bob, whatever you want at this point in your life, it's your call. And he loves that draft series. There's nothing like it out there. So that's back. And the Isaiah McKenzie show is
congrats.
back.
I saw that. That's good.
Very excited for that.
Really excited.
Go beyond the press conference and beyond the locker room. Try to get some Buffalo Bills access.
Especially with his.
That's real.
He's a fascinating guy for this Bills team this year. Like he seems to be they have things in store for him.
It's pretty crazy. I mean, last year was fun. Don't get me wrong, the first season. And so we had half of the shows were live at Mister's, half we did on Zoom. This time, all 8 episodes will be live at Mister's Barn Lanes, East Aurora, New York. The date's all online. But, excuse me. It was interesting, Jim, because he was a gimmick player. I mean, we would joke about it. He's like, yeah, like they pay me to run around and, get people's water and run jet sweeps just for the hell of it. He goes,
Yeah.
like you could tell it bothered him. There was one game I'm like, hey, I really thought you were going to get involved this game. And he just kind of laughed and said, you thought wrong. And then he gets benched. He gets benched after they get blown out by Indianapolis. He thinks his Bills career is over. He was depressed for a few days, couldn't sleep, thought he was done. Then lo and behold, all these other receivers get COVID. They've got no choice but to play him with the season and the division on the line, basically in Foxborough. And he blows up. I think he caught 8 balls for 100 some yards, touchdown. And what we forget is he is Josh Allen's longest tenured receiver. So he's been there.
That's a great stat.
In the middle of the 2017 season, the Denver Broncos cut him, and his career's at this crossroads then because he's fumbling all the time.
No, I know.
And he's been a fixture. I mean, he's caught probably more passes from Josh Allen, practice, whatever, than anybody. So they've got, you can tell watching training camp practices that there's something between those.
That's what I'm saying. I feel that too. Just I've watched enough of them, and read they need to use him. I mean, he is a nightmare on the field. Like he's the type of guy that the coordinator is just, when he's on the field, it's scary because they're already scared enough with everything else you got to deal with. And now you give a straight guy that when he gets the ball, he can score from anywhere. That's fear, instant fear for a coordinator.
I think man-to-man coverage, he probably was always going to be a nightmare for teams. But playing that slot role, you got to be able to read zone. And Cole Beasley was so good at that. And I think he really taught Isaiah a lot.
You have to be able to read zone, and you have to be able to catch with your hands quick. Like that, you got to be able to snatch it and get it in quick.
Yeah. Because
you're usually, because run after the catch is huge and guys are coming. So I agree with what you were saying. The in and out, the zone, reading the zone, and then those fast hands. And you have to have, strong, reliable hands in the slot because that thing's coming.
I mean, there's going to be real football stuff to dig into every week with Isaiah McKenzie. We'll be able to break down the game. So he's as honest as they come. That's why we wanted to do it, to try to give readers, listeners, fans a perspective that you can't get anywhere else because he is so honest and he is given so much of his time and he wants to take people along for the ups and the downs and the wild ride. And I mean, shit, Jim, last year, there was that Patriots game. So that's the highest of high, right? And then when it came to that 13 seconds loss at Arrowhead, we had a show, a couple days after at Mister's, and you could I think he kind of reflected how the whole team felt. It was just lost, confusion, what the hell just happened. But yeah, he's going to play. He might catch 100 balls this year. So all episodes, golongtd.com. They'll be all on the website, video, audio, and then we'll also be sure to get all the episodes right here on your Go Long podcast feed. So you can't miss it. We'll throw it up everywhere. And then that's just, we could spend a whole hour talking about the plans, but we got to get on you too, Jim. Jim, explain your role this year. What people can expect out of maybe one of, if not the smartest man I know when it comes to sport of professional football.
So you're saying you have a small circle of, that was very nice of you. Thank you. That was really nice.
I'll tell everybody who will listen, it's.
No, you do.
Our listeners know, the stories that you share, the insight, the perspective, it is, you don't get that kind of honesty out of people who have been in the game, even former scouts and coaches and GMs. I feel like a lot of times they hedge what they're saying publicly because they don't want to piss anybody off.
They just don't want to say.
You're beyond that point. You don't care.
No, and I think it's been known. It's why we, have so many fun conversations, and I just want to continue to be, have that open part. But then let's do a little more film study this year. Some rookies, just guys that have big stat games. I like to always say, study the stats. If a guy has 3 sacks, let's break those 3 sacks down. Were they really his sacks? Were they scheme sacks? Were they bad offensive blocking? So that's the kind of thing I want to get into this year. So I'm looking forward to this, and Bob being back. This is going to be and we have some good guests lined up. You and I have been talking. So
I know I'd love to tease these guests, but we got to keep them in
we got to
suspense.
keep
I
that
don't think
quiet,
we
right?
can.
Because you never know until it happens. But
Right, and I threw it out there in that post, but we do have a new host. I guess you could say.
I was going to let you talk about it.
Yeah. So we're still kind of figuring out the details, but we can confidently say Fatty Beer Company. They're all over the place now, Jim. Our good friend Nick Fatty has built an empire when it comes to beer.
Blew up.
The best beer distributor in Western New York, but it's even beyond there. I mean, he's got a place down in my hometown, Ellicottville, New York. He just opened up a place in Columbus, Ohio. So I don't know. Maybe we have to hit the road, do some Bengals stuff, and stop at Columbus on the way. But yeah, we're gonna be at the Orchard Park Fatty's establishment. We're gonna shoot for each week, depending on our schedule. So obviously, I'll be
Yeah.
traveling for stories and games and such, and we both have kids, and we can't just like lock in a date with all the moving parts. But I should backtrack. Each Sunday night, we're going to record 2 podcasts, an NFL pod and then a Buffalo Bills centric pod that's a little shorter, but really zeroed in on what Jim knows best, what we like to, talk about the most here on the podcast. So you have that option kind of broken out. And then in my Monday morning, morning after column, I'll be sure to point out when we'll be at Fatty's. So we'll physically go to that Orchard Park spot for a third pod, Wednesday sometime, Thursday. It'll be hitting the shelves, as they say, by Friday at some point. So we'll let everybody know. Just subscribe to golongtd.com. Keep an eye out for the date, the time, and have a beer with us. Hang out with us. We want it to be as interactive, as real as we possibly can. If you're in or around Western New York.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to what you. I'm looking forward to what you recommended at Fatty. I lean on you for the beer knowledge, and so
that's where it gets tricky. So Nick is he's a connoisseur, and we'll get him on the pod. But he does his research. I mean, he researches around the country for like the best IPAs, the best sours, the best wheats, the best lagers. And he researches and he does his homework, and then he brings it in. So it's beer from all over the country. So yeah, I mean, you got to do your homework, I guess. You got to be versatile. You got to be quick on your feet. What are you feeling that night? You feeling?
Do you feel like you have? Yeah. Do you feel like you have good knowledge with this, or are you going to learn a little too?
Well, we might have to work in a little beer segment and see what the listeners think too. So I mean, I'm sure a lot of listeners here have been over to one of the Fatties. There's a great one downtown. There's one in Kenmore. Hamburg is the flagship. So, can't wait for that. And yeah, we just started the kickoff series of features. Thought that could be a good topic for today's pod. Little Minnesota Vikings, eh? What do you think?
They're always one of my favorite teams to talk about because of that quarterback. And, I've talked about my gambling history with Kirk, and I swear to you, he's a good quarterback. I really believe he's a good quarterback. He drives me crazy. I don't think he's a special quarterback. So I think you do have to have a good staff, coaching, game plan, all that right, roster. He's not special talent-wise, but I do think he's a good quarterback. I think their team has ability. That's why I wanted to ask what you think. I believe in their team a little bit. Because what's crazy to me is that Mike Zimmer is known for being a defensive coach, and their defense has been a problem, and that's, to me, that's where I thought obviously you dug into the story a little bit more. I don't, but that, from outsider looking in, I always felt confused by that. Like, why is their defense so bad?
So there's 2 ways to look at that. Let's start there. I mean, if you look at Mike Zimmer, his defense when it was at its best. It was soon after he took over, right? You had hungry young players ascending, buying into his message, and especially he's smart on the back end because it's pretty complicated with the stuff he's trying to run. But it was humming along. I mean, they were a hungry team. They were gritty. They were underdog. They had Teddy
Yeah.
Bridgewater as quarterback. That season especially, it was
Teddy Bridge.
quintessential Zim, right? It was a grit and grime kind of
Yeah.
team. And
Right.
what if you're looking at this through that Zim lens of, okay, he was right, everybody else was wrong. Things turned south when they gave Kirk Cousins the 3-year, $84 million
Oh yeah.
contract guaranteed. So his argument would be, what the hell? I don't need that at quarterback. Give me something cheap. Give me Case Keenum. Give me Teddy Bridgewater. Give me whatever, and let me use that money to get my
Right.
pieces on defense. That would be his argument. Now,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
It's
don't
fair.
necessarily agree with it, but that
It's fair if that's what he believes in.
because what does it always come back to on this pod? The quarterback. You
You're not
need
winning with those. That's what I was gonna say. If that's what you believe, but that's not. You're not winning with those
so
guys.
right, and if you are this defensive, genius, it's incumbent upon you to draft players, develop those players, and get them ready to go. I mean, they did it before, so they had to do it the second wave, and I think that's when things started to go south. Is he is unbelievably demanding, as one of his former coordinators eloquently described him as the devil, Satan. You don't hear the nicest things about Mike Zimmer from several former coworkers, but he was demanding. I mean, and Terrence Newman, I mean, he spoke on the record at length about this in our two-part series, if people haven't checked it out yet, where, I mean, Mike Zimmer got pissed off to the upteenth degree when people started calling for his job. He's reading the headlines. He's obsessed with perception. He can't stand that people think that he should be fired. And it was kind of weird. I mean, I think a lot of coaches were looking at him like, dude, I mean, if you get fired, you can still make a heck of a lot of money. I mean, they owe to you. You just kind of get to fade off for however many years, chill, go to your ranch, hang with your girlfriend, live a good life. But if you cut a player, you're sending his ass to the street. I mean, who knows what happens to that player that's buried on the depth chart. So it was really weird, I think, for a Terrence Newman who played for 15 years to see Mike Zimmer react this way to those headlines. Like, what the hell?
Right.
And that really it reverberated throughout the whole facility. I mean, he was miserable, just ornery, just pissed off all the time, and he let it out on everybody. I mean, I heard this time and time again that his misery kind of became everybody else's misery in meetings, in practice. I mean, in practice, he's beating these guys to a pulp. I mean, it's no surprise that they get to the NFC Championship game and then just collapse against Nick Foles and the Eagles. I mean, physically they're worn down, but mentally they're worn down. They just weren't happy to wake up in the morning. I mean, listen to what Adam Thielen and Brian O'Neill and Danielle Hunter, some of these guys say. We are happy to go to work. Like, we wake up thrilled to be a Minnesota Viking, and it wasn't the case. I think mentally he wore them down. And then if you're a young defensive back and you're getting your ass reamed out, in the meetings, I get it. It's a big boy league. You should be able to take it. But when it's every day, when it's relentless, when it just grinds you day in, day out, and you're 22, 23 years old, you're going to start playing hesitant. You're going to start playing scared. You're not going to be just operating off instinct. I mean, Ben Lieber, he played for Wade Phillips. We talked for part 2. He's like, Wade Phillips, it was see ball, get ball. Just go. Like, he said, look, all mistakes are on me. That was his line. Just play. And we'll figure it out after. Guys in Minnesota weren't playing that freely. It was, all right, what step do I take as a safety? If the tight end moves this direction, do I step here? Do I step there? And shit, that's how you lose games. That's how they lost so many close games. 8 of their 9 losses were by a touchdown or less. Kirk Cousins played well at the end of games.
I'm telling you, he's not the major
he's
problem.
He's not that bad. He was good last year. I've been one of his biggest critics, at least on this pod. And
Tyler,
he played really well.
Doing this quarterback study I've done every year for the last 3 years, it opened my eyes to him more as he's a good, like I said, he's a good quarterback. Like, yes, he's not perfect, but there aren't many that are. And it's like, he gets a hard, I feel like he just gets a hard, takes a lot of criticism. And that's fine at the quarterback position, but you need to give him some credit too. I mean, he has done some pretty good things.
So you were around Andy Reid. You
Yeah.
were around Sean Payton, obviously. You were around Doug Marrone,
Yeah.
Rex Ryan. I mean, we're talking about personalities all over the place, coaching styles all over the place. When you hear this stuff about Zimmer, is it abnormal to you, or are there a lot of Zimmers out there? And how has the game kind of changed, even in your 2 decades in it? I feel like
It
in the
didn't
'90s,
fly.
this was the norm, right? In the '90s, most coaches are probably like that.
I felt like Andy Reid and Sean Payton had similar ability to know that you're not they're not your best friend, but they're not always, they're not going to hammer you all the time either. They were approachable to the players. They cared about the players, which we've talked about before. The players knew they were going to get them in the best position to be great. Did they rip players before? Like, when I say rip, like, were they hard on guys in practice? Yes. Demanding? Yes. They're demanding what they are telling you what it takes to win a Super Bowl. They're not trying to be tough guys. They're trying to say, no, we got to work this hard to get to where we want to go. Just, trust in me. You guys work hard. We're going to get you in the best spot, like you said about Wade.
That really is the fine line on how to be a head coach in the NFL, because you don't want to be a pushover. You don't want to just be somebody that guys are walking all over. And
No, it's
Kevin
not that.
O'Connell, we sat down and talked for about a half hour or so, and he made a point to say that, like, guys know I'm in charge. And Ben Lieber even said that there's an edge to this guy. He's been around him. He's a sideline reporter now. He thinks that we're all going to see it on game day. Like, this is a coach who's got a little gnarliness to him that you're not going to pick up at a press conference in a one-on-one
Right.
interview, even day to day. So that, I think that is important to have that relatability, to be player driven, player friendly, all of that, but still be the guy in charge, right? And it's
That's
not
it.
easy. So
Not
many
easy.
coaches kind of go one way or the other.
Yep. I feel that way, just from my experiences. And it's, I don't know. It does help. You got to get them to buy into you somehow. Players have to buy into what you're selling.
They really do. And
However that is. I mean, however your method is, but they have to buy into you.
Rex Ryan is one of Kevin O'Connell's mentors, one of his primary mentors. He played for the Jets
That's right.
the 2 years they went to the AFC Championship game, and he said a lot of the same things that Eric Wood told us when he came on the podcast. How a Rex Ryan speech can just like make you play above yourself, and you want to reach this different level that you didn't even know existed. You want to run
Awesome.
through a wall, all of that stuff.
Yep.
It's and I see it. You can feel it. Like he I think the way O'Connell put it, it's almost like he can really put in your head there's no competitive disadvantage if you just show up and want to absolutely kick the snot out of your opponent, which it sounds corny.
No,
But there
but
is
it's
something to that.
football.
If you can
It's football.
convince, yeah, if you can convince somebody, nothing else matters. F everything else. Like, you
It's
are going to dominate your man. Like, but that he had schematically some of that Zim in him, right? I mean, we've talked about it, where Rex Ryan's defense, it wasn't green light, see ball, get ball, go. There was too much thinking. Now, he wasn't a ornery old, you know,
hmm,
cuss about it. He
hmm.
wasn't reaming guys out, and the guys weren't fearful and not wanting to go to work in the morning. They liked being around Rex. Players loved him, but that's where in the same kind of way, like, the scheme did kind of, you know, twist a few wires up in the brains of a lot of defensive players that didn't need twisting.
You
So
can't.
it's like, I think Kevin O'Connell, he took bits and pieces of all these coaches. He's with Bill Belichick. We've heard a
Yeah,
lot of
no,
bad
he's
about
had a
Bill
nice
Belichick
tree.
and a lot of
Yeah, he
good.
really has had a good tree.
Sean
Um,
McVay,
I mean, it was fast rise for him. It's a pretty fast rise for him, right?
huge. I mean, it is for all of these coaches that have been around Sean McVay, and for good reason. I think that
I'm
I
not
think
saying
Sean
he's not ready.
McVay
I
is.
think I love it. I'm all about, yeah, to your point. It's McVay. These guys had to speak pretty highly of him and to the owners. And
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so easy to look at the Rams and think, oh, they just signed all these great players. That's why they won the Super Bowl. But it's not that simple.
no,
Guys love playing for the
no.
Rams because Sean McVay has that energy about him, that youthfulness, that he just gets it. He's not going to grind guys down. He's going to maximize every second that you are in the building for
That's it.
good. And when it comes to the offense, I mean, let's face it. Yeah, Zimmer has gone through coordinator after coordinator after coordinator. Some have gotten promotions, some he fired, but he's kind of been lording over the offense as this antiquated, Grim Reaper like presence, saying run the ball, and it's just quit throwing interceptions, or no, take more chances.
It's
And
funny.
I think Cousins has kind of reacted to that, where now you've got an offense where it's modern, it's cutting edge, complex stuff that is actually simple, and then simple stuff that is actually complicated. We talked about that with
I
Kirk
like that.
Cousins, and he's going to have the best chance to succeed. Cousins, that is, when you've got maybe the best wide receiver in football, Justin Jefferson, a top 3, top 5 running back in Delvin Cook, a solid offensive line. Adam Thielen can still ball. KJ Osborne's a good player. Irv Smith has been hurt so much. What a
He's
potential.
ton.
I, that's kind of why we went all out with the Vikings with this series. I think that they are a sneaky team.
I'm with
to
you on
love.
them. Like I told you before, I've always had a love-hate with them, but I agree. I think there's something to this team. I was kind of just looking up. I wasn't sure about their offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
They've made some. I'm looking right now. That center they took in the first round is a good player.
Yeah, what's funny though? It's like when they're Kevin O'Connell, uh, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, when they're really building this team. Yeah, they decided to extend Cousins a year, or at least, I mean, they can still get out of Kirk Cousins, the business of Kirk Cousins, with the dead cap money isn't that bad. Like, they could trade him next offseason, but they could have dumped him this offseason. So they are giving him this trial run. So they are going for it. I mean, when you look at the personnel, the core that they have, at the same time, okay, you're going for it. You Cook, Jefferson, Thielen, Cousins, Harrison Smith, Daniil Hunter. They signed Zadarius Smith. You've got a core here, Eric Hendricks. At the same time, 7 draft picks from 2021. Just last year, 7 of those players were cut. So at the same time, you're like moving on from a lot of Rick Spielman's guys. So
Well,
usually it's one way or another. Like, you're either kind of like
that's fascinating.
all in, or it is a competitive rebuild, as I think a lot of front offices like to say.
When I hear that stat about that 21 draft, that screams of dysfunction.
Yeah.
That screams of head coach GM dysfunction. Where there was probably so many debates, or Zimmer was checked out, or who knows, but that screams dysfunction. That's funny, man.
I'll just say this. There was a lot of scathing commentary and analysis on Mike Zimmer in the story. It's a lot that wasn't in the story.
Yeah,
say that. We talked a little bit off air about it. There was some pretty immoral, might be a little strong, but yeah, I mean, it's very in line with what people say about Mike Zimmer, and very dangerous. Not how a coach should be running a team behind the scenes, and he probably was there 2-3 years longer than he should have been. So there's a lot of meat on this bone. When we kind of go out on a limb with stories like these, it's coming from a substantive place. I'll just say that. And the Minnesota Vikings did the right thing. They had to move on, and they had to take a hard turn toward a coach that is harping on culture. I mean, we've made fun of it. I've made fun of it. I didn't think it really meant anything for the longest
No,
time.
no,
It does. When you hear stories
no
like you
question.
hear in Minnesota with this guy and the way he treats people, it affects everybody. I mean, it really is a trickle down effect. It affects everybody and everything, every tentacle over the organization. Um, you've got to remove the disease. And I think that in a very short amount of time, that Kevin O'Connell has managed to get people excited. And look, they're 0-0. What happens if you're 2-5, right? Like,
Oh,
does the culture really, does it stay strong then? I mean, we'll see. They're going to face adversity. All teams do. I mean,
I love their
even the
first
Rams
game.
didn't win in November last year, so
No, no.
I
What
mean,
about the
it'll be
Vikings?
tested. It will be tested. But I think that they've taken all of the right steps.
Oh yeah, I want this first game. I mean, they're at home against Green Bay.
Yeah, exactly. So what, I mean, is there a
Wait,
team
let me
maybe
talk. I was
go
going to
ahead.
talk about culture real quick. I wanted to say
Yeah.
something about that because you're right. It's not that we make fun of. I think we like to joke around sometimes about some of the coach speak or whatever we hear, but culture is almost you have to have it. It's almost a foundation. The quarterback's going to get you the ring, right? Quarterback
Right.
will get you like you can have a great culture and not make the playoffs.
Right.
I mean, there's teams that have great cultures in there, and they still didn't make the playoff because for whatever reason, they probably don't have the quarterback. But culture doesn't guarantee you a Super Bowl. So I think sometimes I get worried when I hear coaches say, we're going to change, we got to change the culture. And yes, get it. But let's understand that, yes, that's a given. Change the culture is fine, but make sure you get that quarterback if you want to win that Super Bowl.
And what culture are you implementing? I mean, just because you're talking about culture, I
Yeah,
mean, even
that's
O'Connell said, like, I don't really like this term. It's thrown
I don't
around.
either. That's strange to me now. It's
Is the
become strange.
culture one of everybody just being 100% obsessed with football and it's my way or the highway? If that's
Is
the
that the
culture,
culture?
screw that culture. But he really made a point to say it will be player driven, player oriented. Like, if you have an idea,
I
bring it. It's all about everyone in the building.
That's the best answer I've heard. Love it. That's what I was going to say. To me, it's about that. The players have to just want to be there. Like we were talking about, buying into you, wanting to be around it, believe in it. And that's setting the culture. That's what a coach can do. That's a great answer by him. I like that. Because it is. It's, if you make it, you got to make it about the players and not about you.
Yeah. Ego is the enemy,
No question.
right?
They don't want to, the players aren't into hearing, they're not into winning the press conference, as they say, and coaches that want to talk about.
I don't think it's really. And speaking of ego is the enemy, Ryan Holiday, incredible author. I've actually talked to him over the years. He said he'd come on the podcast sometime. Let's add him to the list here. Can't
Man, we're
forget about
getting
him.
some good. Yeah, this has been good, productive.
Yeah. Dan Soder, the comedian, he
Oh
wants
yeah,
to
you
come
were telling
on.
me about him.
Yeah, we got
I
to get
know.
him on.
It'll be good.
Um,
So anyway,
yeah, I mean, I think it's no coincidence that Kevin O'Connell at these press conferences, I mean, he doesn't tiptoe anywhere remotely close to criticizing anything or anyone. Like, it's like he doesn't want negativity in the atmosphere right now.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, hey, being positive, being optimistic, that, you know, it sounds weird to say, but that stuff matters when you see how bad it really was. So thanks everybody for reading. Check it out. We have another Vikings story around the bend coming soon too. So hitting the Vikings hard right now because they are so interesting, right? Usually you do see, if you're a new GM, Jim, and we've talked about this too, it's tempting to walk into a situation and drop a bomb, right? Like, let's just atomic bomb this roster, start
no,
over. It buys
no
you
doubt.
time as a front
Buys you
office,
time.
right?
Buys you time.
And look at the draft next year. It looks like there'll be a decent number of quarterbacks you could choose from. The fans in Minnesota, I think they're okay with sucking right now after being just tortured for decades in constantly just living in this sense of hope and God, you're right on the cusp, and it's Gary Anderson, it's Blair Walsh, it's Brett Favre, it's a roof caving in, it's the Love Boat scandal, it's the Favre text messages, it's everything. And then they've kind of been in this like 500 purgatory toward the back end of Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer's time together. Man, I mean, I think I give them so much credit. Not to mention your GM is a former day trader, right? Who lives in the numbers and would have loved all those draft picks to just take a close look at your roster and decide that Kirk Cousins still has it. You know, you can win with this 34-year-old quarterback if we do this, if we do that, if we do this, and compete. You know, in the past, where I think I have criticized that kind of maneuver. It makes sense here, but all right, let me ask you then: if you're that GM, if you're stepping into that situation, what do you feel that urge to want to start over? Is that real?
No, you go into those interviews prepared, you know, how you're going to build the team. And you always, to me, I would always say you always need to have, hey, this is how I would like to do it when you're talking to the owner. You know, I also can do it, you know, if you're not happy with what I'm presenting, and basically talking probably about the quarterback, I can make it work that way too. But I think I can win with Kirk Cousins. So you go in and present like that. Here's what I can do with Kirk Cousins.
And that's where ownership matters so
huge
much.
Because if the owner says, yeah, I'm okay with that. But the owner might say, hey, I don't want him. Okay, well then I can make that work too. And here's my plan
may
for
have
that.
a sentimental connection to a quarterback or a running back or somebody on the
Yeah,
team.
I just don't think if you're a GM and you should go into an interview and you can't you don't want to go in there and tell the owner what to do. You say, this is what I'm going to do, but listen, I can do it. If you want, if there's something you want done, I can get that done too. I mean, it's your team. I can get it done. I just don't think an owner wants somebody coming in telling him, oh, we're doing this. I'm moving on from this guy. I'm moving on from this guy. Like, hold on, you know.
You were in those conversations.
Yeah,
I mean,
have a plan. Have a plan, but
I drew that comparison in this, I think it might have been the part 2 story where like they're trying to kind of do what Sean, you and Doug did up until you guys were let go, where it's like, okay, like let's compete. Tyrod Taylor, still the quarterback,
let's
Shady.
Go. That's right. And let's build, let's go for it. Yeah.
Still some players going
this is
for
what we have. Let's go.
And you know, they get Josh Allen the next year, you know, in large parts of the trade that you guys made on draft day with the Chiefs. The Vikings, I mean, they're sticking with Cousins. They might be hoping, all right, which is great. You know, you're trying to win now. You're trying to go for it. Let's see if things don't work out, what that quarterback situation looks like. You know, if you win 9-10 games,
yeah,
you know, they don't have, I don't think they have that extra first to maneuver their way back up if they want a quarterback like the Bills did to get Josh Allen.
And that's the other thing we always talk about. Don't ever say just get rid of a guy, because that the next question is, well, who's next? Like, what's the plan if we don't have him at quarterback? And if you don't have a great answer for that, he's your best option. That's not a bad option. He's a winning quarterback in the NFL. That's a hard thing to do. That's a hard thing to be. And I'm not, hey, we had a chance to go after Kirk Cousins and we didn't want to. And I was part of that.
When was that?
That was that off season.
2017.
Yep. We didn't, Doug and I weren't on board. Nobody was.
From then till now? What have you seen?
No, I personally still wouldn't.
Still, I just think he's just better than.
I'm just saying, if you have him and don't have, you know, he's not terrible. I just think you got to be shooting. I was shooting for higher than Kirk Cousins. That was my thinking.
Because, you know, it is similar where we've talked about it, where the part of you guys had that urge, hey, let's just throw Cardale Jones out for a year,
right?
Attack quarterback next year. The Vikings could have done that with Kellen Mond, right? Like, throw him out there, pawn off assets, and get a quarterback.
I told you I was not a Mond fan.
You were not. Chris Sims was.
He was.
Yes, he was high.
Still not over for him, because, boy, does that sound like a terrible, I mean, not a good situation. We talked about it with rookie quarterbacks. I mean,
Yeah.
The situation means so much. If
How
that
many
head
wins you
coach,
giving the Vikings?
well, I don't know how many wins for the season, but you talked me into I'm going to be taking them now against Green Bay in this first game. So thanks.
I saw that Green Bay is favored. I was a little surprised. I mean, the Packers. I might pencil them in for the Super Bowl. I mean, everybody knows I love what they did, personnel wise, but still, like offensively, it's going to take a little bit to figure shit out, right? Like, how does the passing game sort itself out? Yeah, how does Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur, how do they play off of each other with play calling? You're on the road. It's going to be loud. New era for the Vikings.
They
I
couldn't
feel
have
like,
made. You're saying you're surprised Green Bay was favored?
yeah, I was actually surprised.
Yeah. I guess they probably figured if they made Green Bay a dog, they're gonna get that's a lot. They'll probably get too much play on Green Bay as a dog against a new coach, like a new
Yeah,
kind of a first time head coach.
that's true. Still a lot to
So you make
prove.
them a yeah, and I don't think I think that spread's telling you that the Vikings can win that game for sure.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's how I do my analysis on the. I mean, I let the spread kind of at least tell me, like, okay, Vikings, this new coach, there's something to this team. And like you said, you look at the roster,
You've got a nucleus. You don't
it's
have
not
depth.
terrible. That roster is not terrible.
A few injuries though, and I think they're going to be in trouble. You've got a couple trouble spots there. But hey, we've seen teams stay really, really healthy, and they brought in um, the performance expert out there with the Rams. Kevin O'Connell hired him in. He's cutting edge sports science.
Yeah.
Everybody
No,
says they're that guy, but this guy's legit. So
listen.
hey, maybe they can stay healthy because the trainer that was there for the longest time was not the best in terms of keeping guys healthy and worked in conjunction with Zimmer. That's all. That's out.
I'm just saying, quarterback's number one, and then being healthy is number two. I am all for putting whatever you want to put resource wise into sports science, training staff. You have to be healthy for the playoffs.
I don't.
That's what you're
I
playing
wonder
for. I
with
can't
those.
stress that. Like, they're so that's why like the Bills putting Trey White on PUP. Heck yeah, make sure he's good. There's no rush. These first 4 games don't mean anything.
They're not easy first 4 games for the.
I didn't say they weren't. I didn't say that. I'm just saying I don't think they mean it. I'm a believer in the good team. They're going to be there at the end. They have a plan. They're going to be in the playoffs. I'm not saying
came
that.
on last year, 7-6, and they figured out their new identity.
They'll figure it out. That team is this is a good football team. They need to do whatever's right to get healthy. And they got to get Trey White back healthy. They don't need to rush him back, basically.
Yeah, I don't think it's time to freak out over Kyer Elam. I think a lot of rookie corners are up and down in training camp, but they're going to need him to put it together by November. They're gonna be counting on him late in the season in the playoffs to. I don't even really think you need to shut team. You just need to get some stops, right? You need to string together 2-3 stops in a playoff game, and you can win that playoff game. We've seen it. So that's why you bring in Von Miller. You hope he can force a turnover, and on the back end, you hope that he helps you out there too. So. We're always nitpicking with the Bills in terms of trying to find something wrong with this team because they are so loaded. That would be one spot that,
I think that's
going
fair.
into the season, I think the Rams are going to move the ball all over the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I would think so.
With no Trey, but so are the Bills. I mean, that game's going to be fun as hell.
It could be a red zone type. Obviously turnovers are always number one, but like you said, I think these teams go up and down the field. Who can finish their drives in the end zone?
The Bills are favored. Correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is pretty wild too. I mean, the defending Super Bowl champions at home.
There might be more Bills fans at the game.
Oh yeah. Anecdotally, I think we both know like a ton of people going, right? Like it is pretty nuts. All right, Jim, what do you say?
That was good.
Let's slice it right there.
I can't wait to read about you on Pro Football Talk.
Every once in a while, you write a story and you don't know if it's going to take off or not, and sometimes it does. Hey, you know what? Terrence Newman was honest. He's an honest guy. He's an engaging guy. He was open, and we need more of that in the world in general. So kudos to him for speaking the truth. All right.
So
Thanks so much for
long.
listening, everyone.